Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. I'm really excited to have Amy Lundy with me, and we're going to be reviewing the Australian Open 2024 tournament. A very exciting tournament it was. Amy, how you doing?
Awesome. I've really enjoyed the Australian Open this year.
Yeah, it was very exciting, wasn't it? And great to have you back as well. I know our viewers really love having you on, so they'll be excited to hear your insights on it. Jannik Sinner, of course, the winner on the men's side, and on the women's side, Aryna Sabalenka. I mean, what are your thoughts on both winning, and what were your predictions as well before the tournament? That's the most important thing.
I think I've told you guys before that I don't love predicting. It's like not an aspect that I super enjoy. I'm just such a tennis fan that I don't feel any need to make anything more exciting. But anyway, I do. For a column that I write, he asked that I do predict pre-tournament. So I had predicted Sabalenka, got that one right, and I had predicted Novak over Alcaraz, but I had predicted Sinner to go to the final four and Medvedev. So I got, quite a bit right. I think there was for Sinner, there was an air of inevitability, especially having beaten Djokovic twice toward the end of 2023. He was going to get there. It was just a matter of when. And Sabalenka, she just rolled, you know. It was good rivalry shaping up between her and Coco Gauff, and this time with the faster courts, she Sabalenka was able to get the best of Coco.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, the predictions are interesting. And actually, I went for the same. I went for Sabalenka and Djokovic as well. So, but then as soon as I did my preview video for Sinner and Djokovic in the semi-finals, I completely went back on myself. And I actually went for Sinner, but in 5 sets. So, a bit of a brave call, but in the end, it wasn't too bad. So, I got that one right at least in terms of the winner. But actually, yeah, the semi-finalists. Normally, you're very good with semi-finalists. I think it was Wimbledon last year. Like you got all four semi-finalists right for the men's. I don't remember, but I picked Zverev to win the semi-finals and beat Alcaraz, so I was happy about that one. Although it would have been nice to see Alcaraz go through. But I almost ambitiously picked her catch over Medvedev, but Medvedev almost lost. Her catch was
Yeah, that
almost
was a
there.
close match.
Yeah, he could have easily won that. And there was a weird set where Medvedev was like 3-love up, and her catch could have easily been 3-love up himself. He had two breaks of serve or opportunities to break serve. Yeah, Djokovic, obviously, we'll talk about him in a second. And Sabalenka was just, I mean, she was like a wrecking ball throughout the whole tournament, and it opened up a lot, didn't it? Rebecca and Swiatek not going deep, and her draw was quite nice as well. I thought when it came out, so she made the most of it for sure. Should we start off with Sinner and the final, if that's
Sure.
all right? Yeah. So I mean, going into the final, I mean, Medvedev played the most amount of tennis I think I've ever seen anyone play, and it was a question of how he was going to hold up. But did the final play out as you expected? And I think you might tell me it was a tale of two halves when we talk about the final, given it went 5 sets.
Isn't it interesting that there's a debate, an ongoing debate in the tennis world about whether we should go to best of three for the slams? And actually, very few people believe that we should, including myself. I like the best of five format. But there are some substantial voices in the tennis world that want to change. And if you made that change, the outcomes would be so different, wouldn't they? Because Medvedev would have won the match if it were best of
Yeah,
three. Um,
yeah.
I
Murray's one
think,
of them, isn't it? Murray actually was one of the one that, which is really bizarre because he wins loads of 5 set matches. It's even weirder.
yeah, I think the fans probably don't want it. It's often people who work in tennis who find the lack of control over the schedule to be disruptive, you know? And when you're doing best of five, you really, I mean, when you're doing best of three, you don't know when the match is going to end. There's no clock in tennis. But when you're doing best of five, it really can impact the entire day, how you eat, how you sleep, how you warm up, all that. But that's just part of it, you know. You gotta roll with it, and the people who can roll with it the best tend to do the best. So I'm not one of those people, but I'm just struck by how the outcomes would change. And Sinner, props, man, he did problem solving. He just didn't go away. It's like when the old saying that 95% of life is just showing up. He just kept showing up. And eventually Medvedev had to call for the trainer. He was exhausted. It all was catching up to him. And Sinner knew, all I have to do is keep putting, to borrow a phrase, quality shots in the court. And that's what he did.
Yeah, 100%. It really was an intriguing final because after the first set, I had a lot of people telling me who are watching and listening to my commentary, telling me that it's over. Medvedev's going to win. It's going to be easy, straight sets. And I said, don't get carried away. It's best of five, as you say. It's a different ball game to best of three because best of three is shorter and it could be over in an hour and a half, even at times. Whereas best of five, it could be an hour and a half, but it could also be 5 hours. So there's a big disparity and. You've got to play the long game, and there was also the question mark around Medvedev and his legs. Like, how would he fare? In the end, he played the most amount of tennis on court ever in a Grand Slam. I think surpassing 24 hours on court, which is just phenomenal. I mean, the fact that he even made the final and made it as competitive as he did just shows how fit he is as well, which is incredible to see. But yeah, after this, I felt like at the end of the second set, Sinner at 5-1 down, and then he came back to 5-3, and then he had the break point to take it back onto 7. He didn't end up taking it. Medvedev ended up holding and taking the set, but it was almost a feeling of there seems like there's a slight, or that is a potential anyway for a momentum shift, and that's almost what happened in the third set. And as you said, Medvedev started to fade a little bit physically, and Sinner got more confident. I think after feeling like, oh, actually, I have a chance of breaking him because for the first set and a half, he didn't open up a single break point. And Medvedev's serve looked impenetrable for most of it. And Sinner was struggling on serve throughout the first two sets. So, as you said, I think he problem solved really well. And given it was his first ever Grand Slam final to come from 2 sets to love down, he joins a very short list of people to do that in their first. I think he's the first. I think it's 5 people on the men's side that managed to do it. Their first ever slam winning it coming from 2 sets to love down. So he joins a very small club when it comes to that. But were you surprised about how he managed to come back, given it was his first slam and like handle it, or was it a case of actually grew into it and he was then settled, I guess, in the final for the first 2 sets?
I don't know the answer to that question, and this gets into a little bit of Sinner's personality. He doesn't give away a lot. He seems to be an introvert and not, as opposed to Medvedev, not overly expressive and, in interviews, not super, super open. Um, but if he continues to win, he may become like Federer in that after a few years, we start to understand what makes this guy tick.
Yeah, he's a bit of an enigma at the moment, isn't he? He is after you're talking about his parents and obviously like what he had to go through. And you're right actually, because when I think of Sinner, you just think of his tennis, but you don't really know much about his personality. He's very quiet on court. Persona is very. He doesn't do a whole lot of media as well outside of that. And it was intriguing to hear him talk after the final, and his celebration was very reserved. He's almost similar to like a Rybakina on the WTA side, and their demeanor, like not giving a whole lot away. But maybe, as you say, if he keeps on winning, then you'll start to get kind of smaller increments into his personality and a better window of insight into it. So I'm interested to see how he gets on. But I thought he would potentially win, as you said, it was inevitable to win a slam, but maybe towards the back end of the year. But the fact that he turned over the end of the year so quickly and carried on that form was so impressive. And to only drop a set as well. A set up until the final, and then to come back the way he did was incredibly impressive. But in the final, then, so those last few sets, do you attribute it more to Medvedev's fatigue, Sinner's brilliance? Is it a mixture? Like, how did you see it when you were watching it? What was the feeling you got from it?
I would give it like a 50-50 split. Medvedev came out with a strategy, and that was try to take this quickly because if it goes to 5 sets, I might be in trouble just because of what I have in the tank. And it was working. It was working. So then Sinner had to counterpunch and play not defensively, but he was hitting quality neutral ball shots to extend the rallies, and so like a salt and pepper shaker, just seasoning with a little bit of extending the rally mentality or defense mentality, with still hitting his heavy ball, which he's known for. And then, once the rallies got longer, and it was almost like a rope-a-dope situation where Medvedev, was starting to lose it. And, my husband doesn't really, he's more of a casual fan. And he walked in the room in like in the fourth set, I think it was. And he said, why is Medvedev, it just, cold. He walks in the room and is looking for the first time. And he says, why is Medvedev hunched over when he's hitting the ball? And if you look at it, he really is. So I think it was exactly 50-50. Sinner coming up with something to counterpunch his Medvedev strategy, and Medvedev just giving out.
Yeah, 100%. It was almost like after the first two sets, he was like, I'm almost there, and he just couldn't quite carry on doing what he was doing, because when he came out, he was playing so aggressively. And I think they were showing the metrics, and he was hitting the ball like 10 kilometers per hour harder than Sinner. He was hitting more winners than him. He was hitting more aces. His service games were really quick. He obviously didn't have to face a single break point as well. And we also saw a glimpse of what I like to call Netvedev, which was
Yeah.
very interesting to see with his very unorthodox technique, but somehow it was working for him. And I guess he's got octopus like reach, so that's great at the net, and his movement's okay. But his technique's weird, but it works for him, I guess, to a degree. So fine. And we saw some good net play from him. And Sin, I don't think maybe combated it the best as well. Doesn't have maybe the best lob on tour as well. He kind of struggled, I think, and maybe was a bit taken aback by how much Medvedev came forward. But as you say, it was obvious he was trying to shorten the points and be aggressive, and he didn't want to get dragged into the long rallies. But then as the
Right.
match progressed, you saw like after those, towards the back end of the second set, the longer rallies, Sinner started to like be able to dominate them and started to win them. And he started to then be able to be on the front foot, take impetus in the rallies, and hit, as you say, like those heavy balls that he's so used to doing, and being able to actually dictate in the rallies. So I felt like he was struggling not being able to control the rallies. He was having to react rather than actually being the one dictating terms. So I do feel like he struggled with that the first couple of sets, but he almost realized I have to weather the storm, and then he came on strong at the end because he was fresh, as he hasn't played as much tennis. But it was an impressive, I think, mental victory more than anything, because the level of tennis I thought fluctuated throughout. And as you say, Medvedev was hunched over. There were some points where he literally stopped moving. I think he was so tired mid-point. I saw him almost stop for a split second, almost as if he just physically couldn't carry on. And then he did carry on, but he was delayed in like his movement. And so it's interesting that your husband saw that. And sometimes like a casual eye or someone who isn't
Yeah.
as engrossed can see, like, they can see those type of really basic things that we might miss. But
Yeah.
it was definitely happening. So yeah, it was definitely one of the more intriguing finals to watch. But maybe the level wasn't quite there. But it was dramatic anyway, to say the least, I
Yes,
think.
it
Yeah,
was.
for
Good
sure.
match.
Yeah,
Good match.
yeah.
Medvedev, I think, is 6'6" or 6'6" or something like that. Super tall guy.
Yeah.
It's hard to lob him. It would be hard to lob him.
Yeah, true.
And in Medvedev's defense, I think Sinner was getting better depth once the tide started to turn.
He
So
was,
it's
yeah, definitely.
hard to come in off a super deep ball. I mean,
Yeah.
you're just asking for trouble.
Yeah, 100%. You're so right, because when I was doing the commentary, I was saying the first couple of sets, I thought Sinner was struggling to hit the ball very deep. Like, and compared to how he played against Djokovic, I just thought Medvedev was then being able to come forward. And as you say, like, he was definitely hitting the ball deeper, and Medvedev was struggling to kind of be more aggressive in the ground strokes, on his ground strokes, and actually in the rallies. So I almost feel like that 5-1 and that flip, those couple of games that he won, he then started to feel the ball better, and the nerves were gone, and he was like, yep, okay, this is my chance. Let's just go full throttle. were you really impressed with his mentality actually as well? The fact that he came from 2 sets to love down. I know he against a fatigued opponent, but to do it in his first ever Grand Slam final, I mean, did you expect him to be able to have it? It was only the second time he's ever come from 2 sets to love down to go on to win a match.
Yes, I was, especially given maybe some of the scar tissue from the loss at Wimbledon to Djokovic, not this past year, but the year before that, when Sinner won the first 2 sets and then Djokovic stormed back to win the final 3. And Sinner's coach, Darren Cahill, did reference that match after this Australian Open victory, saying that was kind of a turning point for Jannik and understanding what he needed to do to build from a mental perspective.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense because that would have been, I'm sure, a very heartbreaking loss against Djokovic, especially the way that he lost the next 3 sets after winning the first 2 as well. But it was a classic Djokovic win. And talking of Djokovic, were you surprised by how he lost to Sinner? I mean, first time he's ever not opened up a single breakpoint opportunity in his career in a Grand Slam match against Sinner. Didn't clearly play the level that maybe we were expecting of him, but he does also have the ability to not play particularly well and still beat pretty much anyone on tour at times. So was it a surprise to you, given how he ended up losing to Sinner as well, and the fact that he did lose in the end?
No, it wasn't a surprise. It's kind of like when you're a fan of like a football club or you know even an American football team, and you have kind of what you think is a bad loss, but then that the person or the team that you lost to goes on to win it all. Doesn't feel so bad, does it? I mean, this team or this person was hot, and so it takes some of the sting out. Sinner really was all that in this tournament. He was playing very well, high level. Um, so in the past, if you go back years and years and years, Novak has admitted that sometimes he hits a lull in motivation. And he may be having a hard time with motivation right now. I mean, he's the all-time. He is the GOAT. There's really no denying it or disputing it. So he's left with, what do I have to play for? Well, one thing he hasn't, I mean, there are a few things out there, but one thing he hasn't done is the calendar year slam. So if he had a sense that this is just not going to happen for me this year, for whatever reason, then motivation may have been a factor. He's also getting older. You know, he's at that age where he's maybe a little bit on borrowed time. I still think he can win Grand Slams for sure. So, from a psychological or a humanity kind of perspective, I'll be interested to see how he is and where he finds his motivation for the rest of the year.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think for me, I see it as this year is the Olympics. That's really what he genuinely cares about, because I know the slams are great, but he's leading the Grand Slam race and he's won 24 slams. So the Olympics is always, I feel like, the one thing that has eluded him, and he's had some, very controversial and like dramatic moments at the Olympics, and he's always missed it. And he always talks about how he wants it so bad. And everyone was talking about the Golden Slam that Steffi Graf did, of course, and she won all 4 slams in the Olympics, and that's not going to happen anymore. But the Olympics is still there, and it's at Roland Garros, and maybe Rafa will play it if he's fit, and then you got Alcaraz as well, and I feel like he's gearing towards that. And I think someone asked me and said, would he rather have 2 or 3 slams this year? Or would he rather win the Olympics? And I genuinely think he'd rather win the Olympics, because I
Hmm.
feel like he doesn't feel like the slams are as important right now anyway at this current time. So
Why not do both?
yeah, why not do both? Yeah, exactly. Why not do both? For sure. I mean, why not? And it'll be interesting because Wimbledon, I feel like, is the one where he's most likely to win. But you've got Roland Garros and then Wimbledon sandwiched in between the Olympics, right? Which is at Roland Garros again. So It's like very weird. They're going to go from clay to grass to clay. So I don't know how that's going to work, but it'll be intriguing to see how people adapt to it. But yeah, I mean, Novak is incredible. What I did want to ask you is, everyone was talking about changing of the guard after that match, and obviously everyone said after the Alcaraz win, and then Djokovic beat him in Cincinnati, and then won the US Open, and then it died down a little bit. The way that Sinner won, and as you said about motivation as well, is there some parallels to be drawn between this match and say the Federer Sampras match at Wimbledon in 2001? Is it, or is there a feeling that this could be some sort of moment? Now, I'm not saying, as you say, Djokovic could still win slams, but it might not be winning 3 in a year, for example. You might start getting new winners. Do you think that's what's going to happen going forward?
Well, I do think we're in a transition. I mean, we knew that it was going to happen eventually where Novak wouldn't win as many slams. Um, but transitions are rarely, um, V-shaped or a straight line. Sometimes it's zigzag, like, okay, so maybe Novak doesn't win 3 slams this year, maybe he only wins 2. But he'll definitely have his moments this year, or maybe he wins 1 in the Olympics or something like that. So it's, I guess it's human nature for us to want to say it's a changing of the guard moment or whatever, but there's still really good tennis to be played, and this guy is still number 1 in the world. So instead of thinking so much about the future and what this represents, I would encourage people to just enjoy him now while we have him.
Yeah, 100%, 100%, and yeah, I think he'll be here for some time still. But it'll be interesting to see whether the other guys now can start to catch up. And uh, what do you think of before we move on to WTH? I wanted to ask you about the generation of Tsitsipas and Zverev and Rublev. Have they missed their chance, Amy? Because the other guys are coming now. Alcaraz just won 2 slams. Sinner's won a slam. These guys have got scar tissue from Djokovic, and now Alcaraz is starting to do it, and Sinner's starting to beat them. Runa's coming. I mean, are these guys in danger of potentially getting to the end of their career and not winning a slam because they're getting close and they've made, like, Tsitsipas has made a couple of finals. There's only made the one. Rublev hasn't made one yet. And will he win one? Rude is part of that group as well. Will these guys potentially miss out?
No, I mean, I don't think so, but it all depends on their capacity to adapt and change their game. And there's, a level of stubbornness that they'll have to let go of and reckon with. In particular, Rublev, because he plays a certain style and he very much wants to play that baseline style. And the question is, are you willing to change and adapt and try some different things? Because he keeps making that quarterfinal, level, and he's not getting past it. And he knows that there are guys who are in the world that are better than him and are more complete players than he is. So the question is, are you satisfied and content just to be 5 in the world or whatever he is, and just to stay there and never win a grand slam and be a multimillionaire and enjoy tennis the way you want to play the game? Or are you willing to do something really uncomfortable, which is change and adapt so that you can have a shot at winning a grand slam?
Yeah, no, agreed. I think it's going to be a question of changes and whether they're able to continually adapt their games, improve their games. Because I feel like if you look at someone like Tsitsipas, I don't know how much he's actually improved over the last 3 years. It's very difficult to see those real improvements in his game. But the best players in the world, they've the ones that are winning slams, they've made changes. Like Sinner's made wholesale changes. He changed his serve midway through the season last year, which is like really crazy from a platform to a pinpoint. Like, not many players are brave enough to do that. So I feel like
Tsitsipas has been messing around with that as well.
I saw
Yeah,
that. Yeah,
yeah,
I
he
did
has.
see.
So I didn't I mentioned specifically Rublev, but not Tsitsipas because
Yeah,
Tsitsipas has shown the ability to change. It's just is he making the right changes or whatever? But I would
yeah.
say at least he's trying.
Yeah, yeah. I do wonder whether he was trying because of his back rather than actually
Well, yeah,
tinkering.
that may be.
I do
That may
wonder
be.
because he's been struggling with that back injury for a while, and I wonder
Yeah.
whether he's just not rested it properly. But yeah, maybe as you say, it's just a tactical thing. Even though he had one of the best first serve points wins percentage on tour, or
Mhm.
the best. But I know who am I? I'm not a coach, so what do I know? Um, on Sinner then, just to finish off. So there's some of the records that he had winning the titles. He was the first Italian to win the Australian Open, second time to come back from 2 sets down, which I mentioned earlier. Youngest Australian Open finalist, obviously, since Novak, and youngest winner now since Novak Djokovic won his first slam at the Australian Open. First Italian to win a Grand Slam men's title in 48 years, and first men's Australian Open champion outside of the Big Three since 2014. And of course, there's that little quirky 2,195 days since Djokovic's Australian Open or last loss at the Australian Open, and that was the same for him at Wimbledon as well. And then Alcaraz beat him, so there's a parallel there as well. On the men's side, is there anything you wanted to touch on before we go on to the women's, Amy?
Well, just as an American, I have to wonder, we've got a great crop of young new talent,
Yeah,
but I'm cautiously optimistic that we too can be mentioned in the same breath as at least the Tsitsipas's and
yeah,
Rublevs of the world. But
agreed.
I'd love to see an American win a Grand
Yeah.
Slam.
Who for you then, Amy? Like, who are you looking at when you say you think someone can win a slam? Like, who do you have the expectations of when looking at the American players to say, look, I think you should win a slam? Not maybe now, but at some point you should be winning a
Ben
slam.
Shelton.
Yeah,
And then I think Tommy Paul has something that others don't have. Is he capable of winning a Grand Slam? I don't know, but he's one of my favorite Americans to watch.
yeah. Tommy Paul's a really interesting one because I feel like he gives certain styles of players, or the top players, like an Alcaraz, a really tough match. He can potentially beat them as well, and others he really struggles with. And his game can be a little bit inconsistent as well at times when watching him, but he seems to have all the ingredients to do something. Like there's something about him, and I
Mhm.
agree. I can't quite put my finger on it though. It's difficult watching him. So yeah, maybe it will be one of them. I'm a really big fan of Seb Corda, but he just is always injured. So I'm hoping he can stay fit for a period of time. And I think he should be able to make deep runs at slams because I think he's got that type of game. His all-round game actually as well to do well on most surfaces. But we'll see. It's an intriguing time for the US men's side at the moment because the women are doing great. We can talk about the women now, but Coco Gauff obviously lost to Sabalenka in the semi-finals, but in the final it was Zheng Xinwen looking to replicate Lina, who won the Australian Open 10 years ago, and be another Chinese Grand Slam titleist. But Sabalenka, I mean, as we were saying, just too strong, like so strong throughout the whole tournament. Won it without dropping a single set. Retained her title as well, and the first woman on the from the Australian Open or to win the Australian Open consecutively and retain her title since Azarenka, a fellow compatriot as well, who was an incredible player and still is an incredible player on hard courts. She's still playing, of course. What did you think of Sabalenka's like run and how she was playing? Because she just seemed unstoppable, like on the road to the final and winning it.
A lot of confidence, a lot of self-belief, um, winning as she always does, many free and easy points on her serve. But on the return game, that's where I've been really impressed with her growth over the past year or so. Um, she's putting more balls in the court. If you look at the stats, fewer errors on returns, and particularly like second serve returns, where a couple years ago, every second serve return, she would just crack and go for broke. and make so many errors. And that's almost like a double fault if you think about it. A missed second serve return, especially if the server has a weaker second serve,
Yeah,
which most
yeah,
do.
yeah.
So just putting more balls in the court and really working to shape and construct points.
Yeah, she's been really impressive, I think, with being able to find a balance between aggression and being more, I guess, conservative or calculated in her play. And I think she struck the right balance now, as you say, because she still is able to hit, winners off the second serve return, or returners generally, or aces, etc., or off the ground and baseline exchanges. But you also do see, okay, when it is a good second serve, or it's a good serve into her body, for example, she won't just take a massive swing at it. She may throw in a block return and try and go deep down the middle at times when she needs to, and she will throw that in there. And she has that variety to a game that she never used to have. I never used to see a backhand slice, for example, in the past, but now she's added that to a game. It's something that she can do if she feels like she wants to disrupt the opponent's rhythm and it's being a bit too samey from her side of the court, or she's even on the back foot. And I even saw her drop shotting at times. I would never associate the drop shot with Sabalenka in any sentence, I think, before this Australian Open. So it was great to see her. And it's also an effective drop shot because she's managing to push people back with heaviness through the court. And they're way behind the baseline, so it's not a bad tactic to utilize. So I think she's just been really, really good. And yeah, I think the fact that she's been making so little errors is a real testament to the hard work she's been putting in. I think going into the final, and I'm assuming it's still the case after her win, she'd actually hit the least amount of unforced errors out of anyone at the
Wow.
Australian Open, and that just shows. I mean, she's got such an aggressive game, right, Amy? I mean, when I looked at that stat, so I think before the Goff match, she'd only hit 45 unforced errors up until the semi-finals, and Goff obviously, and I think I have to caveat this. She didn't play a particularly good match against Kostyuk, but she obviously hit 51 errors in just that one match. And Goff is seen as being a player who relies on her athleticism, shot tolerance, defensive capabilities, right? So you would expect her to make less errors than someone as aggressive as Sabalenka. So I think it's an extreme example given Goff wasn't playing well, but I do think it does highlight that Sabalenka has really managed to strike up that perfect balance in her game at the moment. She's playing with, as you say, an incredible amount of confidence, and the double faults have gone because I think we've talked about it in the past, and we both agree that the double faults could rear its head at any point. But it seems like she sorted that out. It doesn't seem to be an issue, and hasn't been for a while. So real positive signs. I wanted to ask you: is she going into this year? A lot of people after Swiatek won the WTA finals were saying Swiatek's going to win everything, and Australian Open it's going to be hers, and Sabalenka after losing to Rybakina as well just before the Australian Open, she got bageled by Rybakina, so it was like, oh, was Rybakina? A lot of people picked Rybakina to win as well. Rybakina and Swiatek obviously falling relatively early. Sabalenka, is she the one at the moment that people should be looking to beat? Is she the one that potentially could win multiple slams this year? Or is it a case of she's very good at the Australian Open? As soon as we go onto the clay, we're going to be back into kind of eager land, if you will.
Yeah, it's like if you can beat Iga on clay, then you've really impressed me. Then you're really crossed the Rubicon into relying on more than just your serve, you know? Um, it's okay. Rafa had years and years and years where nobody could touch him on clay. So if that's how it shakes out, that's how it shakes out. But you mentioned Iga, and there's another player that's in transition. She changed her service motion,
Yeah.
and I don't know that it's any less awkward. It's
Yeah, I agree. It does
I
look
don't
very awkward, doesn't it? Yeah.
I still have to look at her serving stats and
Yeah.
see, and she may still be working on it, so I'm not even ready to look at it yet. But watch that. Watch what happens with Iga's serve. And the question would be for Sabalenka in clay season, is she just serving so well right now that it's going to penetrate even clay? Because occasionally you see that happen with a player.
Yeah, you do, don't you? I think She did it in Madrid, but it's a bit different because the altitude and it's a bit of a cheat almost on clay in Madrid because it does go through a lot quicker on the clay in Madrid. But I mean, she made the semi-finals last year, had a match point, didn't she, against Mukova? So she clearly can play on clay. It's just a question of how effective in comparison to, say, a fast hard court will she be. So it'll be intriguing. I want to see that matchup, and hopefully it will. But the Iga's serve is clearly a work in progress. So it'll be interesting to see how it goes throughout the season. And talking of maybe some awkward service motions, I mentioned Zheng Xinwen. I wanted to ask, what do you think of her service motion before we get into a very impressive campaign to the final? But there's a lot of people talking about her service motion.
I'm not a technique expert or a coach by any means, and I've covered all different sports in my life, golf, and there was this guy on the PGA Tour years ago, Jim Furyk, who had the most unconventional golf swing of anyone you've ever seen. People should look it up on YouTube. And he did incredibly well as a pro and made millions and millions of dollars. So I'm not one to criticize as long as it's working for her and she's winning points and matches, which she was in this tournament. Go with it until such time as it's a liability and you need to make a change.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I agree. I think she obviously played well enough. I know she didn't play anyone in the top 50, but you can only play who's in front of you, right? So she put up a decent fight as well in the final when she did manage to get settled. There would have been a lot of nerves, given she'd never played a Grand Slam final before. She was coming up against the reigning champion in Sabalenka, who hits the ball so hard. And I think when Xinwen lost to her in the US Open, I think it was in the quarterfinals, and she lost, I think it was 6-4, 6-love. She came out after in the post match press conference and said, I was just so taken aback by how heavy her ball is, like just how hard she was hitting it. She just really struggled to set herself and was getting rushed a lot of the time. And we saw that, I think, a bit in the final as well. But she definitely gave a better account of herself, I think, as well, and some real positive signs. And the weird thing about her serve is that she is able to hit aces when the first serve's landing. And I think she was leading the ace count for the tournament. So, and she's always up there on the WTA leaderboard. But her first serve percentage in terms of first serves made is always very low. And sometimes it's below 50%. It's just above 50%, but I haven't seen it much be above 65%. So, if she can find consistency on it, it would be great because it's clearly a real weapon. But as you say, Sabalenka was just feasting on the second serve, and that was a massive issue throughout the final for her. But what did you think of her level, I guess, throughout the tournament and strengths, and how do you think she fared in the final in terms of performance?
I think she was hit off the court, which is it doesn't happen all that often, especially when you get to the closing arguments of a tournament. But that's okay. There's really no shame in that. I think the jury's still out. I would like to see more from her. If she can keep that number first serve in at around 65%, that's actually a sweet spot. You don't want that number to get too high usually, because then that means that maybe you're not putting enough on your first serve or it's not, creating damage or difficulty for your opponent. So I guess, a long story short, the jury's still out.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I think we'll see how she gets on throughout the whole year. I'm hoping she goes deep. She's in my top 10, or was in my top 10 predicted WTA list. So I'm hoping she's able to, yeah, keep this run of good form. And she's an exciting player to watch as well. Very heavy forehand, very athletic, decent defense as well. And she's only 21, so it's a long career ahead of her. Were you surprised with the early exits of Swiatek and Rybakina? And obviously, Rybakina played the longest ever WTA tiebreak ever
Yeah.
against Blinkova, which is like an incredible tiebreak. I mean, I haven't seen anything like it. It just went on forever, and I was loving it. I was absolutely loving it. Were you surprised? Obviously, she lost to Blinkova. Swiatek lost to Noskova, who's a very talented young player as well. Were you surprised by the one that they lost early and two who they lost to as well?
Um, I know that Rybakina has been struggling with some injuries. What happened in that match was it was just a battle of wills. It really was. Rybakina was not hitting her forehand with the conviction that I know she's capable of at the end of the match. But who would be in a situation like that? She had so many match points, as did Blinkova, and that just went on and on and on and on, and at that point it becomes kind of a battle of attrition. But at least one of the match points that Rybakina played, she played exceptionally well. It was just Blinkova kept getting it back, sheer will. But then there were other match points where, she had the forehand. It was all lined up for her and she hit it this long. There were several of those. So I don't know what's going on with her, but she needs to get her forehand back in the building.
Yeah, no, 100%. I was very surprised with both, in all honesty. Because well, Noskova, I think she's very talented. I kind of thought maybe she might be able to do something, but I didn't see her winning. And I thought Swiatek, she's normally a given to make a quarterfinal or a semi-final. I didn't have her winning. And Rybakina, I know she's struggling with a few niggles here and there. But I feel like that's always the case with her. So I thought she'd be able to get by on her serve and her ground strokes as well, being able to potentially hit players off the court. But as you said, it wasn't maybe her best performance by any stretch. But there was some positive signs after that win against Sabalenka. There was a lot of hype, obviously, around after that. So it'll be interesting to see how both players get on for the rest of the season now, because they'll I'm sure, looking to pick up their form and get some wins under their belts and go deep at some of the big tournaments now. What did you think of Osaka coming back and her performance versus Caroline Garcia? I thought she looked pretty good, and it was great to see her back on court. What did you think of her level?
That was a long time ago, wasn't
It
it?
was, wasn't it? You're like, you're probably
Ages
like, she was
ago.
playing. Yeah, it was.
Um, I said going into the tournament that I didn't think that the transition back to the tour would be so easy. That and I think that that'll continue, not that she'll play poorly or anything like that, but that there will be moments and flashes of greatness, and then there will be moments where she doesn't look good or she doesn't look like the same player. Um, when you become a parent, as you know, um, as my mother likes to say, your mind is never your own again. So she's going to have to learn how to be comfortable with the discomfort, the mommy guilt. What is you may be playing a match and think, what is my child doing right now? Is she getting fed? Like all those things, and you have to learn to live with that within what you do for a living. So I think it'll continue to be a bumpy transition this year, but I do think we'll see flashes because she's a power player and she hasn't really lost her power. So we'll see some signs of greatness, and then what she does with it and how she adapts, that'll be up to her.
Yeah, I agreed. I think her game isn't really based on movement and shot tolerance. It's more on hitting winners, hitting powerfully, pushing people back, and trying to shorten points. So that's a positive, I guess, coming back, especially initially. She said she's going to play the clay swing, so I'm intrigued to see how she gets on the clay. It's always been, a part of the year that she doesn't really tend to enjoy in the past anyway, but she seems optimistic playing a full calendar, and it'll be interesting to see her there and even on the grass as well. Sounds like she's going to play that as well if she stays fit, so hopefully we see that. That'll be exciting. On the women's side, was there any other players that you were maybe a bit maybe disappointed with, or anyone you wanted to shout out? Obviously, Coco Gauff, pretty good showing after winning the US Open. Made the semi-finals against Sabalenka. It was a tight one. Didn't play her best tennis, but it's good to see her still being consistent. I think Jessica Pegula, obviously, there was some disappointment with her early loss as well, though.
Yes, I was going to say Pagula. Um, that this is a player that consistently, I think, punches above her weight. And just one little loss in focus or anything like that can be, a situation where she goes out early. But she's another player that just keeps showing up. So, and she's had a lot of adversity. Her mom has been not well and is in recovery from a stroke. And there are some things on her, some pressures and things on her that maybe some of the other players don't have. But she's one of my favorite players. Um, this young player, Mira Andreeva, I think is going to be a superstar. So continue to watch her ascent and how she adapts to stardom on the tour. Danielle Collins is a highly interesting player, whether you like her or you don't. She made noise that this may be her last year. Was that just
Yeah,
in the heat of the moment, or, was she serious about that? She
yeah,
too has quite a bit of adversity off the court. So, yeah, those were the storylines on the women's side for me.
yeah, yeah. The Daniel Collins one, I saw a lot of tweets after saying this is very relatable, and I'm sure you can relate when if you play a match against someone at club level and you lose to them in a really tight one, you're up, and then after you're like, I just don't want to play anymore. I quit. I'm not playing tennis anymore. You throw your rackets on the floor and you're upset and you just don't want to do it. And that's almost kind of the feeling you got. And maybe she was always going to announce it anyway, and it just kind of came out with the emotion. Or maybe, as you say, it's a bit not tongue in cheek, but maybe it was just an impulsive move. But yeah, I mean, she's as you say, whether you love her or hate her, she's still, I think, good for the tour. She's got a very explosive game and an interesting personality as well. So she brings something different. So yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see how she gets on. That Andreeva is so. I mean, I just don't understand how someone can be that mature at her age. So it's fantastic to see. And I know they asked her, I think, on court after, how have you played this much better after she beat Jabeur, I think it was. How have you played this much better than last year? And your levels increased. And she said, well, I'm a lot more mature. And I said, you're only 16. She goes, well, I was 15 last year. so, so she seems like she's got a very, yeah, very kind of smart set of skills about her, and I think she'll be she'll be fine and she'll go far. I think. Hopefully, she just stays fit and healthy, and we'll see the best of her. But were you surprised about Jabeur actually? By the way, with the way that she got on?
Um, yes, I was. That one I was surprised. She's still processing a lot of what happened in that Wimbledon final last year, and you know, these people are people. They're human beings. They've got a lot of things and issues going on in their lives that can impact their job. So, I just wish her the best, and I do think she'll figure it out.
Yeah, well, I hope so too. I have her winning Wimbledon just because fairy tale,
Yeah,
fairy
that
tale.
would be
My early
nice.
predictions,
That would
surely
be
at some
nice.
point, hopefully it'll happen, but we'll see. We'll see. No, thank you, Amy, so much for being on. I really appreciate it. Your time is valuable. I know you're busy, as you were saying before. So great to have you back on, and I appreciate it. And hopefully we can catch up soon as well. Is there anything
Always
you
a
wanted to say?
pleasure, always a pleasure. Love being on this show, love just, getting my coffee and talking tennis for an hour, so it's fun. Thank you so much for having me.
No, no problem, Amy. Appreciate it. And guys, please remember to that like button, subscribe if you're new. Also, check out Amy on X. I was going to say Twitter, but it's X now. And also, she writes some fantastic columns and pieces as well. So you can check it out on there because she links all of her articles there. And also, you can check out 3 Tennis Podcast, which I'm sure has lots of post Australian Open content coming as well, or already out. So I do check that out with Gil Gross and Joel Drucker on it as well. So thank you. We'll see you guys very, very soon.